The late afternoon sun filtered softly through the tall windows of a quiet community bookstore in Atlanta, giving the place a warm, steady calm that felt worlds away from the noise outside. Lincoln never visited stores like this, not anymore. His life usually moved through conference rooms, car services, and high-rise offices with too many glass walls and not enough peace. But today, something nudged him inside. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe it was restlessness. Maybe it was that strange ache he never talked about. Whatever the reason, he walked in, slid his hands into his pockets, and let his feet carry him through the aisles without purpose. He wasn't prepared for what happened next. A tiny blur of movement rushed around the corner, arms full of children's science books stacked almost to her chin. Before she could steady herself, her sneaker caught the edge of the rug, and she stumbled forward. Lincoln reacted before thinking. He reached out, steadying her by the shoulders. "Whoa there," he murmured. "Easy." She lifted her head. Bright eyes, sharp, curious, alive. The kind of eyes that examined the world instead of just looking at it. She smiled up at him. "Thank you." Something shifted in his chest, subtle but undeniable. A strange pull, a spark of familiarity he couldn't explain. He didn't even consider himself someone who understood children, yet this moment rooted him to the floor, like he had stepped into a memory he didn't realize belonged to him. Before he could question the feeling, her voice carried through the aisle. "Mommy." Lincoln turned, and time tripped over itself, because stepping into view, calm, poised, graceful, was the last woman he ever expected to see again. Analea. 4 years of silence collapsed in an instant. Her eyes met his. His breath left his body. Not slowly, completely. The world didn't spin or shake. It simply tightened, like the air between them knew exactly what had happened the last time they stood face to face. Isla, still holding her books, moved closer to her mother, but Lincoln couldn't tear his gaze away. His heartbeat thudded in his ears as the truth formed before his eyes, undeniable and sharp. The little girl, the bright eyes, the familiar spark. She looked like him, not vaguely, not by chance, clearly enough to steal the ground from beneath him. His lips parted, a whisper slipped out, rough and shaken. "I didn't know." Analea didn't flinch. Her voice came soft, controlled, and steady. "You didn't want to know." The words cut through the air with quiet truth, not loud, not angry, but heavy enough to make Lincoln feel the weight of the man he had been, and the man he wasn't sure he had become. 3 people stood in that aisle, one overflowing with guilt, one standing on strength, and one with no idea she had just stepped into the most complicated reunion of her young life. A former couple, meeting again by accident, a child between them, a past that never healed. Have you ever said something you regretted for years? What would you do if the past walked right back into your life? Lincoln once threatened her. Now he's face to face with the daughter he never knew. Stay with me as we uncover how love was shattered, and how destiny brought them right back here. Welcome to Mr. Michael Stories, where everyday moments reveal life's most powerful truths. Here, we explore the quiet sacrifices, the tested bonds, and the unexpected grace that shapes us all. If you're new here, we're glad you found us. Hit subscribe to help these stories reach others who need them, and to keep this community growing. Before we continue, family, please like and comment. It helps YouTube push this story to more viewers who love powerful, emotional journeys. Ayla adjusted the stack of books in her arms, completely unaware of the firestorm she had pulled open between the adults standing over her. The bookstore's quiet hum felt heavier now, as if the walls themselves understood the tension resting between Lincoln and Analea. Lincoln swallowed hard. His voice strained when he spoke. "Anna, I didn't know. I swear, Lincoln," she interrupted, her tone calm but edged with a firmness that told him this moment wasn't about comforting him. "We're not doing this here." The sentence wasn't rude. It wasn't cold. It was simply truth under control, the kind that lands without raising its voice. Lincoln shifted his weight, palms unsteady. "Can we talk, just for a second?" The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was 4 long years breathing between them. He forced out the words, unprepared for the answers. "Is she?" His throat tightened. "Is Ayla?" Analea didn't flinch. "You already know." He did. Every inch of him did. But still, he whispered, Why didn't you tell me? Her eyes hardened, not with anger, but with memory. You had your say the last time we spoke. Lincoln felt the meaning hit him squarely. There, in the middle of the children's aisle, he was forced to face the part of himself he had buried. The moment he told her he would ruin her. The moment he became a man he didn't recognize. He opened his mouth to speak again, but the words weren't ready. He wasn't ready, and Analea wasn't obligated to ease his guilt. She stood straighter, not defensive, but grounded. Her presence felt different from 4 years ago, stronger, clearer, like she had built herself back together piece by piece, and no one would ever break those pieces again. Lincoln, she said softly, I'm not here to argue. I'm here because my daughter loves books. The subtle emphasis on my daughter didn't escape him. She wasn't being cruel. She was protecting the life she built without him. Her voice didn't shake. Her hands didn't tremble. She controlled the ground she stood on. And for the first time in a long time, Lincoln realized she didn't need him for anything. The truth landed heavy on his chest. Ayla tugged gently at her mother's sleeve. Mommy, can we go pay for my books now, please? Her timing, innocent, perfectly unaware, cut straight through the tension. Lincoln watched her cling to Analea's hand with natural comfort. He watched the tiny curl of her fingers. He watched the way she glanced up at both adults, confused by the sudden stillness. Sweetheart, give me one moment, Analea said, smoothing Ayla's hair. But Ayla didn't step away. She stayed between them, her small presence forcing both adults to face the truth that their choices had shaped this child's life far more than they ever acknowledged. Lincoln's eyes softened. Ayla looked up at him again, and something inside him broke quietly. This little girl had no idea she was standing in the middle of a wound her parents still carried. Lincoln cleared his throat, desperation creeping into his voice, not dramatic, but deeply human. Anna, please, can we meet, just once? I need to talk to you, really talk. Her jaw tightened slightly. Lincoln, I'm not sure that's a good idea. Why not? He asked, stepping forward just enough to show sincerity, not pressure. Because, she said, looking him straight in the eyes, you're 4 years too late for explanations, and I'm not risking my peace, or my daughter's, for confusion. Ayla tugged her again. Mommy, I'm ready. Analea nodded at her. Then she looked back at Lincoln. Take care of yourself, she said. Simple, final, not cruel, just protective. Lincoln's chest tightened. He wanted to reach for possibilities he had thrown away. He wanted to change the ending he wrote 4 years ago, but Analea was already turning away with Ayla's small hand in hers. And Lincoln stood frozen, feeling the weight of 4 years finally settle where it belonged, on him, before the bookstore, before the shock, before Ayla ever took her first breath. There was a moment, a single sentence, that changed everything. Have that baby and I'll ruin you. Those words didn't come from a stranger. They came from a man Analea trusted, a man she cared for, a man who never raised his voice, yet managed to break her heart in one breath. To understand the weight of today, you must see the fracture that began it. They worked in the same Atlanta corporate headquarters. Lincoln, the young millionaire CEO with a guarded soul. Analea, the steady, warm force who carried her upbringing like armor and grace. Their connection didn't begin with fireworks. It began in tiny corners of the building, quiet elevator rides, late-night meetings, short conversations outside conference rooms. He listened when she spoke, rare for a man surrounded by people who pretended he needed guidance. She made him laugh, a sound he didn't hear from himself often. She challenged him without disrespect. She made the office feel human. They built something people didn't notice immediately, something gentle, something real. It wasn't planned. It wasn't reckless. It was two people seeing each other clearly for the first time, a hand brushing past another during a long work session, dinner after a late shift where neither wanted the night to end, conversations about childhood, fears, dreams. He admired her strength. She saw through his silence. The night they shared together wasn't impulsive, it was inevitable. Two hearts leaning toward one another until the space between them no longer made sense. Neither of them regretted it, but the morning after changed everything. Analea came to him with honesty, not demands. Lincoln, I'm pregnant. He blinked, slow, disbelieving. Not because he questioned her, but because he questioned himself. 1,000 unspoken fears rose in his chest. His upbringing, his father's emotional distance, the pressure of his position, the belief that he wasn't capable of being anything more than a provider. And fear is a dangerous thing when it speaks before the heart can. He didn't mean it, but he said it. Sharp, instant, regret forming before the echo faded. Analea froze, not out of fear, but out of recognition. The man she trusted suddenly sounded like every warning she heard growing up about the dangers of loving someone who didn't know how to love himself. She didn't collapse. She didn't shout. Her silence spoke everything. She walked away. Not rushed, not chaotic. Just done. Her silence was the kind that stuck to the walls. The kind that followed a man long after the moment passed. Lincoln didn't chase her. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to face what he had just done. And that failure shaped the next 4 years. He never forgot the way she held her shoulders. Hurt, but not broken. Disappointed, but not defeated. He wanted to call her back. He wanted to fix what he shattered. But pride and fear teamed up, building a wall he didn't climb in time. And from the window of his office, he watched her leave the building, not knowing that she was carrying a future he had just turned away from. He didn't know the child inside her would become the brightest part of his existence. He didn't know that silence would last 4 years. He didn't know their reunion would happen in a small bookstore on an ordinary afternoon. But destiny knows how to circle back, and it always collects what was left undone. The 4 years that followed Analea's departure were not a simple stretch of time. They were a long, uneven road filled with days she remembered clearly and nights she wished she could forget. Leaving Lincoln wasn't an act of defiance, it was an act of survival. When she walked away from him, she wasn't walking away from love. She was walking away from a future she knew would crush her before it ever offered her safety. The realization that she was pregnant didn't come with a dramatic scene or a sudden collapse to her knees. It arrived quietly, like most truths in her life did. She sat alone in her apartment, staring at a test she already knew would be positive. It wasn't shock that overwhelmed her. It was the memory of Lincoln's words that carved themselves into her heart with a sharpness she didn't deserve. Have that baby, and I'll ruin you. Those words didn't echo. They sat inside her like weight she didn't choose but now had to carry. She wasn't afraid of being ruined. She was afraid of raising a child in the shadow of someone who never gave them a choice at all. But she wasn't alone. Not truly. Even before she shared the news with anyone, she felt the presence of something larger than fear. A quiet reassurance, a reminder that her life had been built on perseverance long before Lincoln entered it. Still, the months ahead weren't easy. Her belly grew. Her job hours grew shorter. Her nights grew longer. Her emotions shifted from hope to exhaustion to determination. She continued to work, continued to fight, continued to believe that she could create a life for her child even if she had to do it piece by piece. There were moments she wanted to break, moments when tears arrived with no explanation, when loneliness pressed against her chest like an unwelcome guest. But each time she reached a breaking point, something small would pull her back, a gentle kick, a flutter inside her belly, a reminder that she was not just fighting for herself anymore. She carried Ayla with more love than fear, more hope than anger, more faith than heartbreak. Every mile of that journey shaped her into the woman who would one day stand in a bookstore aisle, unshaken in front of the man who once wounded her. This is what strength looked like in real life: quiet, consistent, uncelebrated, but powerful enough to build a world from scratch. When she finally shared the news with her family, the reactions were as varied as the personalities in her household. Her mother didn't raise her voice or ask questions she already knew the answers to. She simply sat beside Analea on the living room couch, reached for her hand, and squeezed it gently. "Well," her mother said, "looks like we're getting blessed." To anyone else, those words might have sounded ordinary. To Analea, they carried the weight of generations, women who had survived disappointment, rebuilt their lives, raised children without applause, and found joy even in the hard places. Her aunt arrived with a grocery bag full of food before she even finished processing the news. There were no idle condolences, no pity-filled looks, only strength, only support, only that familiar combination of care and humor Black families mastered long before textbooks tried explaining resilience. "Baby, you hungry?" her aunt asked, digging through containers of mac and cheese, greens, and cornbread. You know stress burns calories. Here, eat. Her cousins drifted in and out of the house over the next few days, bringing laughter, questions, and stories about family history that reminded her she belonged to a line of people who never quit. Her uncle, who rarely said much, looked at her with soft eyes and simply nodded. A gesture that meant, "We got you." There were evenings when the whole family sat outside on the porch, warm lights shining from inside the house, neighbors walking by, music drifting from someone's backyard. Her belly was showing by then, small but noticeable. One of her cousins placed a hand on it and whispered, "You're gonna be something special, little one." The love didn't erase the struggle, but it softened the edges of it. It reminded her that she wasn't stepping into motherhood alone. And most importantly, it reminded her that this child wouldn't come into a world without belonging. Within her community, support wasn't something you asked for. It was something that arrived at your doorstep, wrapped in casseroles, prayers, humor, and genuine presence. The church ladies organized a small circle of prayer when they learned she was expecting. No judgment, only encouragement. "Lord, guide this child," one of the women said. "Strengthen her, mama. Surround them both with your protection," another chimed in. "And make sure this baby comes out healthy and blessed, because this family got plans for that little one." It wasn't about religion alone. It was about connection. The way people who loved her rallied around her without needing an explanation or a speech. Neighbors checked in, offering rides to appointments when her car needed repairs. Older women from the community dropped off meals when she wasn't feeling well. Children in the neighborhood would sit beside her on the porch, touching her belly with wide-eyed fascination, whispering predictions about whether the baby would be a boy or girl. Her mother, who had worked 3 jobs most of her life, became her quiet anchor. She would rub Analea's back when the pregnancy shifted from uncomfortable to painful. She would cook meals when nausea wouldn't let her lift a spoon. She would sit beside her at night when fears crept in uninvited. "Baby, you're stronger than anything you think you can't handle," her mother would say. "Don't forget who raised you." Those words carried her through nights when loneliness whispered louder than faith. Her culture didn't just cradle her, it reinforced her. It built a safety net beneath every step she took toward motherhood. Pregnancy wasn't glamorous for Analea. It was swollen feet, backaches, late-night cravings, and early morning sickness that lasted far beyond the first trimester. It was uncomfortable sleep, appointments she had to take the bus to, and moments where she sat alone in her room, hand over her belly, whispering, "We're gonna be okay." It was crying quietly when her favorite dress no longer fit. It was balancing bills with doctor visits. It was fatigue that pressed heavy on her bones. And yet, she kept going. There were nights when she sat awake, not from pain, but from memory. Memories of Lincoln. Memories of the moment he changed their entire path. Memories of what she once believed they could have been. But she refused to let bitterness take root. Her child deserved love, not resentment. The night she went into labor came earlier than expected. The contractions were sharp, sudden, and unrelenting. Family rushed her to the hospital. There was no father pacing the hallway. No hand to squeeze during the hardest moments. But she didn't feel abandoned. She felt surrounded. Her mother held one hand. Her aunt rubbed her shoulder. Another relative fanned her gently, whispering encouragement. When Ayla arrived, tiny, warm, perfect, every hardship faded into the background. The nurse placed her on Analea's chest. Her daughter's tiny fingers curled around one of her own. In that moment, she knew she didn't need an apology from Lincoln to move forward. She had her reason. She had her purpose. She had her daughter. From the start, Ayla was different. She watched the world with a kind of quiet intelligence, as if she was studying everything, absorbing details no one else noticed. When she was only a few months old, her eyes followed patterns across the ceiling, with unusual focus. Her mother's humming calmed her, but the sound of pages turning fascinated her even more. At 2, she began arranging her toys in color-coded sequences, lining them up with a precision that made her family pause. At family dinners, she sat listening to conversations with an attentiveness beyond her age. When someone cracked a joke, she would laugh, not because everyone else was laughing, but because she understood the humor. At 3, she began taking puzzles meant for children twice her age and completing them in minutes. Teachers at her early learning program pulled Analea aside privately. never naming themselves, never needing identification. "Your daughter is gifted," one of them said. "Her mind works quickly. She sees patterns most kids don't." Isla asked questions like, how does music move through air? Why do seasons change? How do birds learn to fly without instructions? She held books like treasures. She explored the world like a scientist. She loved fiercely and gently, especially her mother. Her intelligence wasn't loud. It was thoughtful, observant, and naturally blooming. She grew up in a home filled with love, culture, laughter, and support. She never sensed the absence of a father, not because that absence didn't matter, but because her mother made sure the presence of love overshadowed what was missing. Still, there were moments when curiosity flickered in her eyes. "Mommy," she asked one evening, tilting her head, "how many people make a family?" The question pressed lightly against Analea's heart. She answered with warmth, brushing a curl from Isla's forehead. "As many as love you, baby." Isla accepted the answer, but that spark of curiosity never dimmed. Guilt didn't show up all at once for Lincoln. It didn't knock on the door or shout from across the room. It settled gradually, like a slow ache he couldn't name, a tension just beneath his ribs, a heaviness behind every decision. For the first few weeks after Analea disappeared from his life, he convinced himself she would reach out again. Maybe to talk, maybe to yell, maybe to demand an apology he was already rehearsing in the privacy of his thoughts. But the call never came. Not after a week, not after a month, not after a season. Her silence met him each morning and escorted him to bed each night. He returned to work with the same posture, confident, polished, unreadable. People still respected him, still admired his success, still saw him as the man who built an empire before reaching his mid-30s. But on the inside, something had cracked, and guilt seeped through every fracture. He replayed that day in his mind more times than he admitted, even to himself. Her face when he said the words, his own voice, sharp, unrecognizable. The silence that followed, heavy and final. The door closing behind her. Guilt became a quiet companion, one he couldn't shake no matter how many hours he worked or how successful he became. It wasn't the guilt of losing a relationship. It was the guilt of losing a good woman through a moment of fear he never learned to control. And the longer she stayed gone, the clearer it became. He didn't deserve her forgiveness. Sleep abandoned him shortly after. At first, he blamed stress, the company, the meetings, the pressure of running an empire built on decisions people trusted him to make. But it wasn't the company keeping him awake. It was memory. He lay awake for hours, staring at his ceiling, tracing invisible outlines of the woman he pushed away. Moments with her arrived like quiet films, her laugh in the elevator, her eyes lighting up during late-night conversations, the softness in her voice when she told stories from her childhood, the way she looked at him the night they crossed the line between colleagues and something more. Every memory felt like an unfinished sentence. Nights became longer than days. He would fall asleep sometime around dawn, only to be jolted awake by dreams that felt more like reminders than nightmares. Dreams of her walking away, dreams of her crying, dreams of her holding her belly, dreams of him calling out, but no sound coming out. He woke up with his chest tight, breathing hard, sweat cooling across his skin. His employees whispered about how tired he looked. They assumed he was working himself too hard. Nobody knew the truth. His past kept pacing the floors of his mind, refusing to sit still long enough for him to recover. Lincoln rose to success early in life. Deals closed under his guidance. Investors trusted him. Board members admired him. Reports praised him. But none of it hit the same anymore. He sat at the head of conference tables, but felt disconnected. He signed contracts, but felt no pride. He launched new projects, but felt no spark. He began to question everything he once valued. Was this really success? A top-floor office with glass walls and a view of the city? A team that followed every order? A schedule filled to the brim, but a life completely empty? Before, achievements had meaning. Now they were distractions, temporary, thin, incapable of touching the deeper parts of him that were silently unraveling. He found himself staring at his reflection in office windows, wondering when he had become a man who broke the person he admired most. His colleagues celebrated milestones. He clapped along mechanically. The applause felt distant. His world appeared full, but he had never felt emptier. Lincoln avoided therapy for months. He told himself he didn't have time. He told himself he didn't need it. He told himself he could handle guilt alone because he had handled everything alone. But his sleepless nights intensified. His mood shifted. His appetite disappeared. His focus cracked. One morning, after arriving at work disheveled and unfocused, he quietly booked an appointment. He sat in a comfortable room with soft lighting and neutral walls. The therapist, not named per your rules, spoke gently, slowing down his speeding thoughts. "What brings you in today?" Lincoln looked at his hands. They were trembling slightly. "I lost someone," he said. "Did you want to talk about that?" He hesitated. "I didn't lose her," he corrected softly. "I pushed her away." Therapy didn't fix him overnight. It didn't erase his guilt. It didn't tell him what to do. But it forced him to speak. And speaking cracked open emotions he had buried long before he met Analea. He talked about his childhood, cold, structured, loveless, expectations without tenderness, achievements without affection. He talked about the night with her, not in detail but with emotion, how he felt safe, vulnerable, exposed in a way he didn't understand. He talked about the moment he said the words he could never take back. The therapist asked, "What were you afraid of?" Lincoln paused, because the truth was ugly. "I was afraid she'd be better off without me," he admitted, "and I was afraid she'd prove it." Over the sessions that followed, he pieced together a deeper truth. His greatest fear wasn't fatherhood. It wasn't responsibility. It wasn't change. His greatest fear was being loved by someone who deserved more than he believed he could give. Dreams became familiar visitors, not the gentle kind, the kind that left him staring at the ceiling, breathless and shaken. In one dream, she stood in the hallway outside his office, looking at him with disappointment so sharp he woke with a gasp. In another, she held a small child whose face he couldn't see. When he reached for them, she turned away. Sometimes, she didn't speak in the dreams. She just stared at him, her silence echoing the moment she walked out of his life. But the worst dreams were the simple ones, sitting beside her, talking, laughing, feeling the connection he had once taken for granted. Those were the dreams that undid him, because waking up meant remembering he had thrown it all away. He would whisper her name into the darkness sometimes, hoping the sound of it would quiet his mind. But it only reminded him that her absence was his own doing. With each passing month, as he received no word from her, Lincoln's guilt twisted into a painful misunderstanding. He believed she chose to disappear completely. He assumed she didn't want to reconnect. He assumed she hated him. He assumed she moved on. He assumed she never wanted him to find her. He never considered the truth. He made himself unsafe the moment he threatened her. She didn't cut him out of her life. He handed her the scissors. In his mind, she had walked away and built a life where he was no longer needed or welcome. He had no idea she was raising a child, their child. While he spent nights wondering why silence felt like punishment, he couldn't escape. Every year that passed deepened his conviction that she didn't want to be found. He accepted that. He believed he deserved it. He learned to live with the ache, or at least pretend he did. But destiny had not forgotten him. It had simply waited. Until one ordinary afternoon in a bookstore changed everything. Isla's early years were a mix of curiosity, humor, and a natural spark that made every room she entered feel brighter. One morning when she was 3, she climbed onto the couch with a serious expression, one far too mature for her tiny body. She looked at her mother, hands on her knees, and declared, "Mommy, I think my brain is full." Analea paused mid-laundry fold. "Full of what, baby?" "Questions," Isla replied, tapping her forehead gently. "Too many. They keep walking around in there." Her mother laughed, a full, beautiful laugh she hadn't heard from herself in a long time. "Well," she said, sitting beside her, "maybe we can let some of them out." Isla nodded solemnly. "Yes." Before they bump into each other, another day, she insisted on making breakfast for both of them. She pushed a chair to the counter, grabbed a bowl, and cracked an egg with far more confidence than accuracy. Eggshells scattered everywhere. Her face fell for only a second before she announced, "It's okay. Learning is messy." She said it so matter-of-factly that her mother had to sit down to keep from laughing too hard. Even at her young age, Allah had a way of turning everyday frustration into unexpected wisdom. There was also a phase where she insisted the moon was following her home each night. As they drove back from errands, she would stare out the car window, whispering, "Mommy, it's still behind us. Why is it chasing us? Does it need something?" Her mother tried to explain, but Ayla wasn't satisfied. At 3 years old, she decided the moon was lonely and chose them as friends. She even waved at it before bedtime, saying, "Good night, moon. Stay safe out there." Her brightness wasn't loud. It was gentle, thoughtful, sometimes hilarious without her meaning to be. She carried joy the way some children carried toys, effortlessly, naturally, and everywhere she went. Ayla's intelligence wasn't forced or trained. It unfolded slowly and clearly, like a flower opening in its own timing. At 2, she sorted her crayons by shade, light blue to dark blue, yellow to gold, red to maroon, while humming softly. At 3, she began solving puzzles in ways adults didn't expect. Instead of starting at the edges, she recognized shapes by patterns and spatial relationships. Her mother watched in awe as her tiny hands moved confidently, assembling complex pictures faster than she could describe the pieces. And at 4, the signs became undeniable. She memorized entire stories after hearing them once. Not just the plot, the tone, the dialogue, the rhythm. She asked questions no toddler her age typically asked. Why does rain fall down instead of up? What does a cloud feel like if you touch it? How does light know which direction to go? During one afternoon at the library, she sat cross-legged in the children's section, flipping through a book far above her age level. A library assistant approached gently and asked, "Sweetheart, do you want help picking books your size?" Ayla shook her head with polite seriousness. "No thank you. My size is small, but my thinking is tall." Her mother covered her mouth, hiding a smile. Later, at home, Ayla built towers with blocks, arranging them with intention. "Every shape has a job," she said. "Some just need more time to learn where they belong." Her mother would watch her work, quietly, attentively, sometimes forgetting she was only 4 years old. The gifted behavior wasn't just intellectual. It was emotional. She understood feelings in ways Analea hadn't expected. If her mother looked tired, Ayla would place a hand on her cheek and whisper, "You need a soft moment." If her mother laughed loudly, Ayla would beam and say, "I made your heart happy today." Her brilliance wasn't just in her mind. It was in her spirit. Curiosity bloomed in stages. At first, she simply asked why some kids in her books had more than one adult tucking them in. Then she noticed the families on her street, some with both parents, some with one, some with grandparents raising grandchildren. She wasn't confused, just observant. One evening, after a long day of exploring the backyard and making nature soup with leaves and water, Ayla crawled into her mother's lap and inspected her face with warm, wide eyes. "Mommy," she said softly, "how many people are supposed to be in a family?" Her mother's breath caught for a moment, not because she didn't have an answer, but because she knew exactly what Ayla was truly asking. "Well," she began, brushing a curl from her daughter's forehead, "a family is made of the people who love you. Is there a number?" Ayla pressed. "Like 2 people? Or 3? Or a whole bunch?" "No number," her mother replied gently. "Just love." Ayla tilted her head, thinking deeply. But what if someone is missing? Can a family still be a family? The question landed directly inside her mother's chest. "Yes," she whispered. "A family is still a family." Ayla accepted the answer, for that moment. But the seed of curiosity continued growing. At daycare, she asked a helper, "Do families always start with 2 grown-ups?" The helper simply said families come in all shapes. At the playground, she observed a child being picked up by 2 parents, then asked her mother afterward, "Mommy, do I have 1 grown-up or 2? Her mother kept her voice warm. "You have me. And that's more than enough." Ayla nodded, but her mind kept working. The questions weren't coming from longing. They were coming from awareness. She sensed a missing piece long before she understood what that piece was. Raising Ayla alone wasn't a burden. It was a blessing. A beautiful one. A purposeful one. But motherhood had its moments of quiet ache. There were nights when Ayla slept curled against her chest, soft breaths warming her arm, and Analea felt full of love, full of purpose, full of gratitude. And yet, after Ayla drifted off, when the house fell silent, the ache would rise in her slowly. Not because she wanted Lincoln back, not because she needed him, but because she knew that someday, Ayla's questions would grow sharper. Why wasn't her father around? Did he know she existed? Did he care? Was she unwanted? Those questions terrified her not because she couldn't answer them, but because she didn't want to plant pain inside her daughter's heart. She sat many nights by the window, watching cars pass by on the street below, rocking gently as she held Ayla. The city lights flickered like reminders of people living lives she wasn't part of anymore. Sometimes she spoke softly, almost to herself. I hope you never doubt you were wanted, even if the world tried to tell me otherwise. She never spoke badly about Lincoln. She never cursed his name. She never described him as anything other than someone she once cared for. She believed Ayla deserved a clean heart, not a wounded one. Still, the ache persisted, not constant but present, like a soft reminder of unfinished chapters. Whenever Ayla asked about families, her mother answered with love. Whenever Ayla pointed out fathers on the playground, her mother kept her smile steady. Whenever Ayla made drawings with two figures, one big, one small, her mother praised her creativity without letting her own emotions spill. But each of these moments left a tiny bruise inside her. She wondered if she had done the right thing. She wondered if keeping Lincoln out of their lives forever would harm Ayla more than protect her. She wondered if one day Ayla would resent her for the silence she maintained. Still, she knew why she made her choice. She chose peace over pain. She chose stability over chaos. She chose to protect her daughter from a man who threatened her at her most vulnerable moment. The ache didn't mean regret. It meant love, a mother's love deep enough to carry both strength and sorrow at the same time. As Ayla grew, so did the unspoken truth. She had her mother's warmth, but her mind moved with a rhythm that didn't come from Analea alone. Ayla carried pieces of someone she had never met, someone who didn't know she existed, yet lived with guilt heavy enough to keep him awake at night. One day, their worlds would collide. But for now, Ayla was simply a brilliant little girl living in a home built from love, culture, resilience, and quiet questions. Questions that would one day lead her straight into the path of the man who once feared her existence. The moment felt suspended, like the air itself refused to move until all three of them understood what had just happened. Lincoln stood perfectly still in the middle of the aisle, unable to blink, unable to breathe, unable to comprehend the timing of fate. His hands, the same hands that steadied Ayla just seconds ago, dropped slowly to his sides as realization poured through him with an intensity he wasn't prepared to face. Analea's eyes held his, steady and unreadable. Her posture was calm, too calm, and that stillness made the moment heavier. There was no shock in her expression, only control, only strength. The bookstore around them grew quieter, background noise fading into something distant. The subtle hum of an air vent, a soft thump of books being rearranged by another customer, the delicate tapping of Ayla shifting her weight. Every sound seemed muted against the weight of their history. Time didn't speed past them. It slowed to a crawl. Lincoln's gaze flickered between the woman he once loved and the child who stood beside her, tiny fingers still wrapped around the edges of her books, balancing more than her little arms should have been able to hold. His heart changed rhythm. It wasn't panic. It wasn't confusion. It was a dawning truth, one so powerful it almost staggered him. He didn't have to search for resemblance. He didn't have to squint or tilt his head or make excuses for what he saw. Ayla's bright eyes, sharp, curious, stunning, were undeniably his. It hit him like a blow he never saw coming. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't a chance encounter with an ordinary child. This was the daughter he had unknowingly abandoned, the daughter he had pushed away before she even existed. His chest tightened, breath caught somewhere between disbelief and regret so deep it threatened to swallow him whole. The reunion didn't explode. It didn't crash. It landed softly, quietly, and tore his world open in silence. Ayla shifted again, trying to adjust her grip on her books. Lincoln bent slightly, instinctively reaching to help her, but stopped halfway through the motion, because as she lifted her face, he saw everything in one glance. Her nose, her eyes, the curve of her expression when she concentrated. Even her stance, feet angled slightly inward, mirrored the childhood photos he used to avoid looking at. He didn't need confirmation. He didn't need a test. He didn't need a timeline. He just knew. Something inside him broke, quietly, but thoroughly. His voice came out strained. She's mine. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a guess. It was recognition hitting him with absolute clarity. Analea didn't respond. She didn't need to. The truth was standing right in front of him with a stack of books heavier than her small arms. A wave of remorse washed through him, thick, suffocating, overwhelming. His legs felt unsteady, his breath shallow, his heart pounding in a rhythm that didn't feel like his own. His daughter. He was looking at his daughter for the very first time, and she had no idea who he was. The air between Lincoln and Analea tightened, not hostile, not combative, just full of things never said, choices never explained, moments never repaired. Anna. He breathed, the name shaking slightly as it left him. I didn't know. She studied him with an expression that revealed nothing and everything at the same time. You didn't want to know, she said softly. Her voice didn't rise. Her face didn't twist. She wasn't angry, not in the way he expected. But there was a calmness in her tone that made his regret feel sharper. I never would have, he began. Her eyes narrowed just enough to stop him. Lincoln, she said, quiet but firm, don't rewrite history. You said what you said. The bookstore lights reflected off her face, and in the glow, he saw the weight she must have carried alone. He saw the strength she built in his absence. He saw a woman who no longer needed explanations because she learned to live without them. He swallowed hard. Words gathered in his throat, but none felt right. Can we talk? He whispered. Please. A bookstore aisle isn't the place for that. Anna. No, she said gently, holding her ground. I don't owe you that here. Her ability to stay composed only deepened his turmoil. He wanted to reach for the past. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions. He wanted to apologize for 4 years in one breath. But their conversation wasn't about what he wanted. It was about reality, one he'd stepped into without warning. A soft tug at Analea's hip broke the tension. Mommy, Isla asked, her voice sweet and curious. Do we still get the books? The contrast between the adult storm and her innocence softened the moment instantly. Analea turned to her daughter with a gentle smile. Yes, baby, we're still getting your books. Isla nodded with cheerful certainty, unaware of the emotional earthquake happening inches away from her. Then she turned to Lincoln. Thank you for helping me, she said politely. Some people let books fall. You didn't. Lincoln's throat tightened. He forced a small smile. You're welcome. Her smile widened. I like your shoes, she added, because children notice things adults overlook. The simplicity of her compliment cut through him, piercing in a way he didn't expect. Emotion rose suddenly, pressing against his chest. He had missed 4 years of compliments like that. 4 years of questions like that. 4 years of small moments that should have been his. Thank you, he whispered. Isla nodded again, satisfied, then tugged her mother's hand toward the register. We need to pay now, Mommy. The books want to go home. Her mother chuckled softly. Lincoln watched the exchange, watched the ease, the connection, the closeness, and felt something ache deeply. He wasn't part of this world. He wasn't part of her memories. He wasn't part of her stories. But she was part of him. And now that he had seen her, he knew he would never be the same. The moment Ayla walked ahead toward the checkout counter, leaving a sliver of space between the adults, something inside Lincoln finally snapped. The composure he fought for, the posture he tried to maintain, the calm breathing, the steady voice, all of it crumbled. Not dramatically, not loudly, but with a quiet force that made the moment heavier. His chest rose sharply, and his next breath came out uneven, barely holding together. He lifted a hand to his face, pressing his fingers against his temple, trying to collect pieces of himself that no longer felt connected. Anna. Her name broke from him like a confession. He didn't cry in public. He didn't fall apart where people could see. He had built himself into a man who handled crisis without blinking. But this wasn't crisis. This was consequence. His consequence. I didn't know, he said again, but this time the sentence came from a place deeper than regret, the place where guilt lived. His voice cracked on the last word. The bookstore shelves around them faded out of focus. His vision blurred. He steadied himself on the edge of a display table, shoulders shaking just enough for her to recognize he was no longer capable of holding up the walls he'd kept in place for 4 years. His breath hitched again. "I didn't know," he whispered, almost to himself. "I didn't know." The irony was cruel. The man who once believed losing emotions made him strong was now unraveling because he began to feel again. And she stood there watching a version of Lincoln she had never seen. Not the CEO, not the polished executive, not the confident man she once shared a night with, but a human being completely stripped of his defenses. She didn't move toward him. She didn't touch him. She didn't raise her voice. Her strength wasn't in confrontation, it was in clarity. "Lincoln," she said softly, "you need to breathe." He blinked, eyes glistening, trying to pull himself together. She continued, her tone steady and grounded. "We didn't talk because you made it clear that day that you didn't want to be part of this. I wasn't going to fight someone who didn't want to stay. You think I didn't want?" He tried to say, but emotion tightened his throat again. "I think," she said carefully, "that you spoke from fear, but fear or not, your words had consequences. I had to protect myself. I had to protect my child." Her words weren't heavy with bitterness. They were precise, controlled, carved from memory rather than resentment. "I wasn't angry at you," she continued. "I was hurt, deeply. But anger fades. Hurt becomes acceptance, and acceptance becomes distance." Lincoln's jaw trembled. He wiped his eyes with the edge of his sleeve, ashamed that he couldn't hide his emotions. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "I was so wrong." She nodded. "I know. But I couldn't wait for you to realize that. I had a baby to bring into the world." Her tone remained calm, as if she had spent years preparing to speak this truth without letting it destroy her peace. In that calmness, Lincoln felt the weight of everything he had missed. He lowered his head. Did you tell her anything about me?" It was not a question of ego. It was fear. Fear of the damage he may have caused without even being present. Analea took a slow breath. "No," she said. "I never spoke badly about you." His head lifted slightly, surprise softening his features. "Why?" he whispered. "Because Ayla deserves a whole heart," she answered. "Not a wounded one." Her voice carried a softness that didn't shield the truth. It illuminated it. "I didn't want her growing up thinking she was the child of a mistake. She is the child of a moment we shared. A moment that meant something to me, even if what happened after didn't reflect that." Lincoln closed his eyes, swallowing hard. "I didn't tell her you didn't want her," she added gently. "I didn't tell her about the argument. I didn't tell her about the fear that drove you away. Children don't need that. They need stability. They need love. They don't need adult pain." He wiped his face slowly, overwhelmed by her restraint, her ability to separate the past from the child it produced. "It wasn't my place to define you as a monster," Analea continued. "Not when you weren't there to defend yourself, and not when she deserved better than a story poisoned by hurt." Her steadiness, her refusal to turn their history into bitterness, broke him even more. "You protected her," he said quietly. "I protected all of us," she replied. He stepped closer, not threateningly, but vulnerably, like a man who had nothing left but honesty. "Anna, I know I don't deserve anything. I know that. But please, please let me be part of her life." His voice cracked again. "I want to know her. I want to understand her. I want to be responsible for something other than my career. I want a chance, just a chance, to show up." The words felt raw coming out of him. Years of regret condensed into a single plea. "I can't undo what I said," he whispered. "But I can do better moving forward. I can try. I want to try." Analea held his gaze, absorbing every syllable. Her expression didn't soften immediately. She wasn't swayed by desperation. Her decisions came from reason, not emotion. "Lincoln," she said finally, choosing her words with care, "I'm not trying to punish you. But I need you to understand something. Ayla is not a second chance. She's not a redemption project. She's a child, a brilliant, sensitive child. And her heart is not a place for you to explore if you're unsure." "I'm sure," he said quickly, almost too quickly. "I've never been more sure." Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion but in evaluation. "You say that now," she replied, "because seeing her changed something in you. And that's real, I'm not denying that. But showing up once is not the same as being consistent." He nodded vigorously. I'll be consistent. Consistency takes time, she said. And commitment, and honesty. I'll give all of that, he insisted. For the first time, her expression softened, not drastically but subtly, like a door unlocking rather than swinging open. Isla's world is peaceful, she said. I built it that way. If you enter it, you enter with responsibility, not emotion. I understand. And if you enter it, she continued slowly, you enter because you're ready, not because you feel guilty. Lincoln's breath shook. I'm ready. I swear I'm ready. She studied him for several long seconds, searching for truth beneath the fog of emotion. Finally, she said, We'll talk, but not today. Today is too charged. His shoulders sagged with both disappointment and relief. But if we do this, she added, we do it carefully, thoughtfully, and with Isla at the center, not us. He nodded. I want that, more than anything. She took another breath, grounding herself. Then we start slowly. Her words weren't a promise, but they weren't a rejection either. They were a beginning neither of them expected, a beginning born from a chance encounter in a bookstore aisle that Destiny had been preparing for 4 years. Isla's arms were full, the stack of books nearly reaching her chin as she tried to walk toward the cashier. Her feet shuffled carefully, her tiny body leaning slightly to the left under the weight. Analea took a step to help her, but Ayla stopped suddenly, turning her head toward Lincoln instead. Can you help me again? She asked, her voice soft but confident, as if she somehow sensed he was someone safe. Lincoln blinked, stunned. Me? Yes, she said, tilting her head as though it was obvious. You helped the first time. Books like you. He let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. His hand trembled slightly as he reached out to take the books from her arms, careful, almost reverent, in the way he held them. Isla's shoulders relaxed instantly. She reached out and grabbed one of the corners of the stack, helping him help her. Teamwork, she said proudly. Lincoln's lips parted in an involuntary smile. She didn't know she was his. She didn't know why her presence affected him so deeply. She didn't know her simple request, can you help me again, was enough to shake a grown man who thought his heart had forgotten how to feel. They walked slowly together, her tiny feet pattering beside his long strides. She kept glancing up at him as if studying him the way she studied patterns in her puzzles. You're tall, she observed. Lincoln chuckled quietly. Yes, I guess I am. Do tall people read a lot? She asked. Or did you grow tall because you read? Analea nearly smiled. Lincoln's breath hitched, her curiosity, her way of forming questions, the way her mind connected ideas. It was him. It was unmistakably him. I think, Lincoln said gently, I grew tall because I ate my vegetables. Isla nodded seriously. I eat vegetables too. So I'll grow tall like you. He swallowed hard, emotion tightening in his chest. You might, he said softly. For a moment they walked without speaking, the three of them forming a quiet line toward the register. But the silence wasn't heavy this time. It held something else, something tender, a beginning that none of them had planned for. Isla glanced up again. I like your voice, she said simply. Lincoln froze. His throat tightened. The compliment, innocent and gentle, hit him harder than anything he had heard in years. Thank you, he said quietly, his voice breaking just slightly. Isla didn't notice the tremble. She only smiled. A child's acceptance was often effortless, but for a man drowning in guilt, her natural warmth felt like a miracle. When they reached the checkout counter, Ayla placed her hands on the counter and leaned forward with a seriousness that made the cashier smile. These books are heavy, she announced, but important. The cashier nodded. Looks like you picked some good ones. Isla pointed at the stack. This one is about how plants talk to each other. They talk quietly though, so only smart people know. Lincoln felt his eyebrows lift. Plants? Talking? At 4 years old, he never even considered such an idea. But Ayla wasn't guessing. She wasn't pretending. She was genuinely fascinated. What do they say? Lincoln asked, engaging her. Isla looked up with bright eyes. They warn each other about danger. They help each other grow. They share sunlight if one doesn't get enough. She paused thoughtfully. I think plants are nicer than people sometimes. Lincoln couldn't speak for several seconds, because her words, simple yet profound, felt like a direct reflection of everything he had failed to do for her mother. "Do you read about plants a lot?" he asked gently. Isla shrugged. "I read about everything. Everything." She said it as though knowledge was an adventure she ran toward with open arms. "Do you like stories?" he asked. "Only the ones that make sense," she replied. "If they don't make sense, I make them make sense." Lincoln let out a soft laugh. "That sounds very clever." Isla nodded proudly. "Mommy says my brain works like a busy road. Lots of cars, no traffic." Her mind, the speed of it, the way she structured ideas, reminded him of himself when he was a child. His tutors once said he learned too fast, asked too many questions, connected patterns too quickly. He recognized himself in her, not just in her features, but in her mind. He watched her fidget with her fingers, humming quietly, a habit he had as a child when he was thinking deeply. He was looking into a world he should have been part of from the beginning, and understanding that world now filled him with awe and grief. Analea stood slightly behind them, arms crossed, not defensively, but thoughtfully. She watched the scene unfold with an expression that held more layers than she let on. She saw the way Ayla gravitated toward Lincoln, naturally, without hesitation. She saw how quickly her daughter engaged him with curiosity. She saw Lincoln's entire posture soften in her presence. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't sentimental. It was human. Isla spoke with him as if they had known each other longer than 3 minutes, and Lincoln responded with a gentleness she hadn't seen in him in years. Watching them together stirred something complicated inside her. Not regret, not longing, not even anger, just something heavy and unexpectedly hopeful. She had spent years protecting Ayla from the possibility of disappointment. But this moment, quiet and unplanned, showed her a side of Lincoln she didn't believe existed anymore. And it wasn't just that he was being kind. Anyone could be kind. He was present, fully present, emotionally aware, soft in a way she did not remember him being. But even as she observed the connection forming between father and daughter, she kept herself grounded. Being gentle with a child for 10 minutes isn't the same as being consistent for years. Still, she couldn't deny what she saw. When Isla laughed at something he said, a small smile tugged at the corner of Analea's lips. When Lincoln bent slightly to listen to Isla more closely, she noticed his sincerity, not performance. When Isla tugged his sleeve to show him a picture inside one of her books, she saw how carefully he gave her his attention. These weren't rehearsed behaviors. They weren't guilt-driven gestures. They were instinctive, natural, unforced. The scene planted a seed in her, not trust, not forgiveness, but the possibility of something she never expected, a beginning that wasn't built from pain. There was a moment, small, fleeting, but powerful, that shifted everything inside Lincoln. Isla had set one book aside and was flipping through another with rapid excitement. She paused on a page with an illustration of animals migrating together. She pointed at it and said, "When someone gets tired, the others help carry them." Lincoln stared at her, the words sinking deeper than she intended. He opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed hard. "That's a beautiful way to live," he said quietly. Isla nodded. "Mommy says people should do that more." He glanced at Analea. Her eyes met his, and for the first time since he saw her in the aisle, there was no accusation there. Just truth. The bitter irony washed over him. For years, he feared fatherhood. He feared responsibility. He feared the idea of becoming someone else's foundation. He feared becoming the man who once terrified him as a child, cold, unresponsive, absent in all the ways that mattered. But standing here, watching Ayla turn pages with confident little hands, hearing her speak with a mind so sharp and a heart so soft, he realized something that squeezed his chest. This child, the one he feared, was awakening parts of him he thought were broken forever. Ayla hadn't just softened him. She had reached into the quietest corner of his being and lit a small, steady flame. Not forgiveness, not redemption, possibility. He watched her lean against the counter, humming to herself as she waited for her mother to finish paying. His breath caught. He didn't just want to know her. He needed to know her. Not for himself, not out of guilt, but because she was extraordinary, and he knew without hesitation that her brilliance and warmth came from a place he had abandoned, but now desperately wanted to be part of. As Ayla turned toward him once more, eyes bright with curiosity, he felt something inside him settle into truth. He wasn't afraid anymore, not of her, not of fatherhood, not of the past, because the child he once feared had become the child he couldn't imagine losing again, and fate, in its quiet and undeniable way, had led him right back to her. The next conversation didn't happen at the bookstore. It happened outside, in the open air, while they stood near the parking lot under the warm Atlanta afternoon sun. Ayla walked between them, swinging her small bag of books like it weighed nothing. She hummed to herself, hopping once every few steps the way children do when their energy doesn't have a direction but still needs to go somewhere. Lincoln and Analea walked slower, careful, cautious, measuring each step as if the ground beneath them had changed. Ayla glanced up suddenly. "Can we read one in the car, Mommy?" "Yes, baby," Analea replied. Then Ayla turned, not to her mother, but to Lincoln. "You can read it too," she said confidently. "You read nice." Lincoln blinked. His breath paused. She had known him for less than an hour, yet she was inviting him into a moment that felt sacred. He crouched a little to meet her eye level. "If your mom is okay with that, I'd like to." Ayla looked to her mother with an expectant grin, the kind of grin that made it hard to say no. Analea hesitated, only a second, before nodding. "That's fine." Ayla cheered softly and ran ahead to the car. Lincoln watched her go, still stunned. "She trusts quickly," he whispered. "No," Analea corrected gently. "She trusts sincerely. She doesn't give it easily. There's a difference." He nodded slowly, letting the truth settle in. When they reached the car, Ayla slid into her seat, grabbed a book, and handed it up to Lincoln as he stood near the open door. "Read the first part," she demanded, sweetly but expectantly. He smiled. "Yes, ma'am." He opened the book carefully, like it was fragile. His voice softened as he began reading, the rhythm of the sentences flowing smoother the longer he spoke. Ayla listened, enraptured, her head tilted and her eyes wide. At one point, she interrupted him. "Why do you read slow?" He chuckled. "So I don't miss anything." Ayla nodded, accepting this logic. "That makes sense," she said. "Some people read fast and miss the good parts." He glanced toward Analea again. Her expression gave nothing away, but her shoulders were softer than earlier, less guarded. When he finished the chapter, Ayla clapped once, dramatically. That was good. Lincoln felt something warm spread through him, something he couldn't name but desperately didn't want to lose. A few days later, they met again, this time intentionally. It was cautious, planned, discussed between the adults with clear boundaries. But it happened. They met at a small family-friendly cafe with outdoor seating. Neutral ground. Safe space. Ayla brought 3 of her books, spreading them out on the table like she was preparing for an important presentation. "Mommy, you sit." "He sits here." She pointed beside her, directly between them. Lincoln hesitated, looking to Analea. She gave a small nod. He sat. Ayla immediately shoved one of her books into his lap. "This is the one about the moon." She tapped the cover. "I think the moon gets lonely, but Mommy says it's busy. Which one is true?" Lincoln smiled gently. "Well, I think the moon is steady. It doesn't leave. It's always there, even when you can't see it." Ayla gasped softly. "So it watches us?" "In a way," he answered. "It lights up the night so we don't feel alone." She stared at him, eyes widening with the kind of awe children reserve for ideas that resonate deeply. "Mommy," she whispered. "He knows moon things." Lincoln laughed. Analea pressed her lips together to hide a smile. Then Ayla started asking more questions. Endless questions. Why do shadows stretch in the evening? Why do leaves fall in different shapes? How does sound travel? Her mind spun fast, skipping from one topic to the next. Lincoln answered patiently, carefully, breaking down complicated ideas into simple ones without dismissing her curiosity. "You think like a scientist," he told her. Ayla sat straighter. "Is that good?" "That's wonderful." She beamed. Then she asked him in complete seriousness, "Can you teach me how to make the air warm when it's cold?" Lincoln blinked. "Well, I can teach you how the sun works." "Okay," she said, nodding. "Start." He paused, laughed, then began explaining light, heat, and energy in the simplest words he could find. Ayla absorbed every syllable. What about, she demanded. Can you teach that too? We can try. And clouds? Yes. And why people sneeze? We can do that too. Isla turned to her mother. Mommy, he knows everything. Lincoln felt something expand inside him, something gentle and terrifying at the same time. Because he didn't want to be everything. He just wanted to be present. At one point, Isla opened her backpack and pulled out a notebook. The pages were filled with drawings, patterns, shapes, lines connecting in ways that looked random but weren't. This is my thinking book, she declared. Lincoln leaned closer. Can I see? Isla nodded eagerly. She flipped through the pages, showing him grids she'd made herself, lists of things I want to learn, and attempts to draw the sun, the moon, and the inside of the earth, which looked surprisingly detailed for a child her age. I make ideas in here, she said proudly. I don't show everybody, only Mommy. And now you. Lincoln froze, not visibly, but emotionally. Only Mommy. And now him. He felt the weight of that trust, that inclusion, hit him with a force that nearly knocked the air from his lungs. He flipped carefully through the notebook. One page had scribbles labeled, Questions I need answers for, before I'm 6. He read aloud, How does sound move? Why do people cry? What makes a heart feel heavy? He paused. His throat tightened. He read that last one again quietly. What makes a heart feel heavy? He looked at her, eyes softening. That's a very important question. Isla nodded seriously. I wrote it when Mommy looked tired. His chest constricted. She saw things. She understood things. Even the emotional shifts adults thought children couldn't sense. He turned another page. There was a drawing of 2 stick figures, one big, one small, not labeled, just drawn. He stared longer than he meant to. Isla tapped the drawing. That one's me, she said, then tapped the bigger figure. And that's someone I haven't met yet, but I think I will. Lincoln inhaled sharply, not loudly, but enough that his body reacted before he could hide it. Isla, he whispered. What made you draw that? She shrugged. My brain said it. His vision blurred for a second. He closed the notebook slowly, careful not to tremble. You're remarkable, he managed. Isla smiled. I know. The cafe moment should have been simple. It should have been light, effortless, sweet. And it was. For Ayla. But for Lincoln, it was layered, heavy, transformative. Sitting beside the child he didn't know existed for 4 years felt like being given 1,000 moments all at once. Moments he should have lived, moments he should have earned, moments he could never reclaim. He watched her laugh as she swung her feet under the table. He watched her mix questions with stories. He watched her draw another pattern in her notebook, and every second hurt and healed him simultaneously. He wasn't used to emotion like this. Emotion that wasn't controlled. Emotion that wasn't scheduled. Emotion that didn't fit neatly into a meeting or calendar block. He wasn't used to wanting to cry without understanding why. He wasn't used to feeling vulnerable in front of people who didn't judge him. He wasn't used to admitting, even to himself, that he had missed something he never had. His chest tightened again. He cleared his throat, trying to steady his voice. You're incredible, he whispered to Isla. She didn't hear the tremor. She only smiled. Then she leaned her small shoulder against his arm, casual and trusting, as she colored another page. The contact, simple as it was, shook him. He looked at her mother. Analea didn't speak. She simply watched with a quiet, contemplative gaze. Her expression wasn't romantic. It wasn't forgiving. It was measured, like she was analyzing whether he could handle the emotional weight Ayla carried effortlessly. He swallowed hard. He didn't know how to be a father. He didn't know how to express what was breaking inside him. He didn't know how to fix 4 years of absence. But he knew one thing with absolute clarity. He wanted to try. He wanted to learn. He wanted to stay. He wanted to be someone Ayla could lean on without hesitation. The emotions he spent a lifetime suppressing now sat in his chest, loud and overwhelming. And for the first time, he didn't want to push them away. News travels quietly in communities, not in newspapers, not in headlines, but in whispers, raised eyebrows, and soft-toned conversations behind grocery aisles and after church gatherings. Within a week of Lincoln and Ayla's small cafe meeting, People in Analea's circles began to notice a new presence, a white man. Well-dressed, soft-spoken, following closely behind a little girl who had her mother's curls and his unmistakable features. Some people didn't comment at first, but the glances were there. The curiosity, the assumptions. One afternoon, when Analea picked Ayla up from her daycare program, two mothers lingered by the door, speaking just a little too loudly. "That's the girl's father?" one asked, feigning innocence. "Mm-hmm," the other replied, folding her arms. "You know how men like him do. They show up late and expect a trophy." The first woman sighed. "Or they disappear again." Their tones weren't hateful, but they held warning. Protection, a quiet suspicion shaped by history. Analea pretended not to hear, but the words pierced her. Not because they were unkind, but because they reflected fears she still lived with. Later, at home, Ayla proudly announced, "Mommy, he said he'll teach me how shadows work." And while that brought a smile to Analea's face, a heavier thought lingered. Does the world understand what this means for her? For us? On the other side of the city, in Lincoln's world, the tensions took a different form, polite smiles with sharp edges. Lincoln's colleagues were the kind of people who disguised disapproval behind phrases like, "interesting choice," or "that's unexpected." Days after he began spending time with Ayla, he walked into a board meeting with a rare softness in his eyes. A softness so out of place that the room noticed immediately. One of the executives leaned toward another and whispered, "Looks like someone found a distraction." Another member, older, raised an eyebrow. "He's seeing someone?" "No idea," the first man whispered. "But I saw him at a cafe with a woman and a little girl. Didn't look like business." The meaning behind the statement wasn't subtle. Later that evening at an upscale networking event, where the air was filled with champagne bubbles and polished greetings, a woman approached him, someone he knew from investor circles. "I heard you've been involved in the community lately," she said with a curious smile. Lincoln stiffened. "What do you mean by that?" "Oh, nothing," she said lightly. "Just that it's surprising to see someone in your position spending so much time outside your social level." Her tone was gentle. Her implication was not. Lincoln's expression darkened. "My position has no bearing on who my family is," he said sharply. Her eyebrows rose at the word family. "Family?" she repeated. "I didn't realize." He cut her off. "And you don't need to." He walked away, jaw tight, heartbeat pounding in his ears. For years, his circles praised his professionalism, his wealth, his discipline, his strategic partnerships, but none of them knew how to react when he showed genuine emotion, especially for a woman outside their world and a child they didn't expect. They didn't see Ayla's brilliance. They didn't see her curiosity. They didn't see her worth. They only saw difference, and difference made them uncomfortable. Lincoln learned something important that night. Ayla didn't just need a father. She needed one who would defend her, without hesitation, without apology, without fear of judgment. On the other side, in the community that raised Analea, the reaction wasn't judgment, it was caution. Protective caution. The kind that came from years of seeing good women hurt by men who showed up unprepared, unsteady, or too late. One Sunday afternoon, at her mother's home, a cluster of relatives sat around the living room while Ayla colored on the floor with her favorite pens. Her aunt asked casually, "So, this man is really back in the picture?" Analea inhaled slowly. "He's trying." Her cousin raised an eyebrow. "Trying how? Trying like, I'm here for a day, or trying like, I'll show up again next month?" Her uncle, who normally stayed silent, spoke firmly from the corner chair. "A man has to prove himself. Words don't raise a child." Another relative chimed in, "Don't let him confuse Ayla. Kids remember disappointment." Their comments weren't wrong. They weren't cruel. They were protective, rooted in love. Her mother waited until the chatter slowed, then said quietly, "He can try, as long as he knows who's been here from the beginning." The room nodded. Later that night, when everyone went home and the lights dimmed, Analea sat on the couch alone, her thoughts heavy. She wasn't worried about herself. She wasn't afraid of being hurt again. Her greatest fear was seeing Ayla hurt. Ayla, who trusted quickly. Ayla, who loved deeply. Ayla, who already drew pictures of two figures without knowing one was missing. The caution her community carried was the same caution inside her heart. The shift inside him became visible. It started the day he overheard two men at his company making ignorant comments after seeing Analea outside the building. One said, "You think she's with him for the money?" The other smirked. "Probably. They all—" He didn't get to finish. Lincoln stepped forward sharply, his voice low but dangerous. "Finish that sentence and you're done here." Both men froze. "I don't tolerate disrespect," he continued. "Not toward any woman, and definitely not toward the mother of my child." The hallway fell silent. The men stammered apologies. Lincoln didn't care. "Next time you speak about her," he said, "remember this moment." He walked away without waiting for a reply. Another moment came when someone in his social circle posted a picture of him at the cafe with Ayla and tagged it with a comment. Didn't expect this from him. He messaged the person immediately. "She's my daughter. Never speak about her like she's unexpected again." The person apologized. He didn't respond. He didn't need their approval. He didn't need their comfort. He didn't need their validation. For the first time in years, he saw the difference between silent privilege and active protection. He had been quiet too long, hiding too long, avoiding emotion too long. Now when someone questioned her, or Ayla, or their right to be in his life, he felt something rise inside him. A fierce devotion, a clarity he never had before. And it showed. One afternoon, as he and Analea walked Ayla to the car after another cafe visit, he said quietly, "I wasn't strong for you before. I won't make that mistake again." She didn't reply, but she didn't need to. Something inside her shifted just slightly, enough to show she heard him and believed at least part of it. The shift came quietly, not through drama, not through confrontation, but through a small, unexpected email in Analea's inbox. She was sitting at her kitchen table, grading a set of documents for a position she was applying for, an internal move that would raise her income and give her more stability for Ayla. The email subject line read, "Concerns regarding your previous employment." Her stomach tightened. She opened it. The message contained a forwarded rumor, a claim that she had been fired from Lincoln's company 4 years ago due to an unprofessional situation. She blinked, reread, blinked again. Her hands trembled just slightly. Fired? Rumor? Unprofessional? She had resigned, quietly, with dignity and no drama. Why would someone say this? Why now? She scrolled. The rumor came from inside Lincoln's company, from someone who clearly wanted to damage her reputation before she reached the final interview for her new role. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was sabotage. She closed her laptop and sat perfectly still at her kitchen table, while Ayla played nearby with crayons, drawing another constellation only she understood. The betrayal didn't sting because she thought Lincoln did it. No. She knew him now, knew his remorse, knew he would never attack her career. It stung because the world had found a new way to punish her for a mistake she paid for alone years ago. Someone was using her past with Lincoln as ammunition. Someone who didn't know the truth. Someone who didn't care about the consequences. Her career balance, the thing she had built with sweat, late nights, and silent determination, was now wobbling on the edge of a rumor she never deserved. She exhaled slowly. "I knew peace was too much to ask for," she whispered under her breath. The next clue came from a short message sent by one of the HR administrators handling her application. "We have been informed that you were terminated 4 years ago due to a personal conflict involving your previous employer. Can you verify this before we proceed?" Terminated. Personal conflict. Involving your previous employer. Her heart sank. Someone in Lincoln's company had resurrected the one thing that could jeopardize her career trajectory, the assumption that she had been unprofessional, reckless, or problematic during the time she was pregnant. A lie. A blatant lie. But lies had power when whispered by the wrong mouths. She stared at the message, the weight of it settling into her chest. She would not, could not, allow this to silence her progress. But she also knew that clearing her name required confronting the past she had spent 4 years trying to outrun. Ayla tugged her arm gently. "Mommy, you look sad." Analea forced a small smile. "I'm okay, baby. Just thinking." But Ayla didn't move. She leaned into her mother with the softness of a child who felt more than she understood. Do you need a soft moment? She whispered, repeating the phrase she always used to comfort her. A tear slipped from the corner of Analea's eye. Yes, she murmured. I think I do. But this wasn't just about her. This was about the life she was building for her daughter, a life she refused to let anyone tarnish. And if the rumor was spreading inside Lincoln's company, there was only one person who could stop it at its source. The job she was applying for wasn't just another step. It was the step, a position with better pay, better hours, better benefits, more stability for her and Ayla. She wasn't chasing status. She was chasing security. The email she received next chilled her. Due to unresolved concerns regarding your previous employment, we may need to delay your final interview. Delay. A dangerous word. It often meant the opportunity was slipping away. Her hands shook as she held her phone. After all this, she whispered. She had rebuilt her life from the ground up. She had balanced single motherhood with work. She had protected her daughter from emotional chaos. She had created peace where there once was pain. But a rumor tied to the darkest moment of her life, was threatening everything she worked for. She paced the living room quietly, while Ayla napped on the couch, surrounded by her notebooks and tiny scribbles. Her thoughts spiraled between fear and frustration. I don't deserve this. Why now? Who would say this? Why bring up something that never even happened? She breathed out slowly, then whispered, I have to tell him, not because she wanted his help, not because she needed saving, but because this wasn't just her battle anymore. It involved his company, his employees, his past mistake, and if he truly wanted to be part of Ayla's life, this was the moment to prove he could be responsible. When she asked to meet him that evening at a quiet park not far from her home, he arrived early, nervous, hopeful, unsure of what the conversation would hold. He saw her walking toward him, her posture strong but her expression tight. His smile faded immediately. Anna, what's wrong? She didn't sit next to him on the bench. She stood before him, taking a moment to steady her breath. There's something happening at your company, she said, and it's affecting me. His face hardened with concern. What do you mean? She explained everything. The email, the rumor, the accusation that she had been fired when she was pregnant, the suggestion that there was a personal conflict. Lincoln's eyes darkened in real anger, the kind he rarely allowed himself to feel publicly. Someone said that about you? He asked slowly. Yes. And they said I fired you? Yes. His jaw tightened. That never happened. You resigned. I know that. But they don't. He stood abruptly, too overwhelmed to sit still. Who would say something like that? Who has access? Who would? He stopped mid-sentence. The realization hit him. Someone in his world, someone he trusted professionally, was using his past actions to harm a woman he had already hurt once before. The guilt deepened, but this time it was paired with fury. I will fix this, he said firmly. I don't care who said it. I don't care why. They will retract it, publicly if necessary. She studied his expression, not impressed, not swayed, but cautiously hopeful. This isn't just about clearing the rumor, she said. This is about understanding the damage it caused. I can't lose this opportunity. You won't, he promised. Not because of something tied to me. I won't let that happen. There was something different in his eyes. Not desperation, not guilt, but responsibility. For the first time, he wasn't trying to defend himself. He was standing up for her. Not as a man trying to prove himself. Not as a father seeking redemption. But as someone who finally recognized the cost of his silence 4 years ago. He sat back down, raking a hand through his hair. Anna, this happened because of me, because of what I said, because of the environment I created. If someone in my company felt comfortable spreading this rumor, then I failed twice. She said nothing. He continued, I can't undo my past, but I can take full responsibility for the present. And I will. For the first time since she told him the news, something in her posture softened, just a fraction, but enough. Thank you, she whispered. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. They sat in silence for a long moment, two people tied together by history, separated by pain, pulled back together by a child, and now a crisis neither of them chose. Lincoln finally looked at her, voice steady. This isn't the end of the problem, but it's the beginning of the solution. "What do you mean?" she asked. He exhaled. "This rumor didn't come from nowhere. Someone wanted to harm you. And if they wanted to harm you, they wanted to harm Ayla too, indirectly." Her eyes narrowed. He continued, "I will find out who did this, and when I do, there will be consequences." The breeze carried the weight of his words between them. This wasn't a threat. It was a vow rooted in accountability, a vow born from the man he refused to be anymore. And as the sun dipped behind the trees of the quiet Atlanta park, a new realization settled over both of them. Their story wasn't just about regret and healing. It was about confronting old wounds so something stronger could be built in their place. The next chapter would demand truth, courage, and choices that could reshape all three of their lives. Lincoln wasn't running anymore. He was preparing to fight. Not for himself. For them. The opportunity came sooner than expected. A major corporate event was scheduled, a gathering of executives, board members, investors, partners, and media personnel. It was the kind of event where every word was measured, every handshake intentional, every gesture watched carefully. Lincoln had attended dozens of these. He had spoken confidently at each one. But this time, he wasn't stepping onto the stage as a CEO showcasing achievements. He was stepping onto the stage as a man correcting a 4-year-old wrong. The ballroom lights dimmed slightly as he approached the microphone. A quiet ripple of curiosity moved through the room. He looked different today. Not polished, present, not rehearsed, resolved. He took a slow breath. "Before we continue with tonight's agenda," he began, "I need to address something personal, something important." Executives shifted in their chairs. A few whispered, some lifted brows at the unusual introduction. But Lincoln did not waver. "Years ago," he continued, his voice steady, "I said something unforgivable to someone who didn't deserve it. Someone who worked hard for this company. Someone who contributed with professionalism, dedication, and integrity." A hush settled across the room. "I let my fear dictate my actions. I let my personal weaknesses create pain. And even though I cannot undo what was said, I can acknowledge the truth." He paused. A camera clicked somewhere in the back. "I did not fire her. She resigned with dignity. Any rumor suggesting otherwise is false." Whispers grew louder. Some eyes widened. He held the podium firmly. "And today, I am publicly apologizing to her, not because it looks good, not because this room expects it, but because it is right." Another breath. "Her name is Analea." The room shifted again. Some recognized the name, some didn't. Many were stunned that he mentioned her in public at all. "She is the mother of my daughter," he said clearly. "A brilliant, extraordinary child who deserved her father long before I had the courage to become one." A collective silence spread like a wave. Lincoln softened slightly. "I am not speaking as a CEO right now. I am speaking as a man who failed a woman he cared about, and is determined never to fail her again." He stepped back from the microphone. The room didn't erupt into applause. It didn't need to. Silence was respect. Silence was acknowledgement. Silence was the world adjusting to a new truth. And Lincoln walked off that stage knowing that, for the first time, he had done something worthy of being called a father. The next morning, an internal message went out to the entire company. Subject: immediate clarification and policy enforcement. The email was firm, unambiguous. Lincoln wrote, "Any statement suggesting that Analea was terminated from this company is categorically false. She left voluntarily, and with my full respect. Anyone responsible for spreading misinformation will face disciplinary action." He then called a mandatory meeting with HR and senior executives. His tone was not negotiable. "This ends now," he said. He demanded a full investigation into who spread the rumor. Logs were checked. Emails were traced. A name surfaced. Someone who had made an offhand comment, unaware of its consequences, unaware it would reach outside the building. The person claimed it was a misunderstanding. Lincoln didn't care. He stood over the conference table, voice cold and controlled. "Your misunderstanding threatened a woman's livelihood. You attempted to stain her reputation for no reason other than office gossip. That behavior is unacceptable." The disciplinary action was swift. He walked out of the meeting with only one priority left: protecting her opportunities. He contacted the organization handling her job application personally. He spoke with the hiring committee. He gave them documented proof. He cleared the timeline. He clarified the truth. And he ended with, "She is one of the most capable individuals I've ever worked with. If you pass on her, you're passing on talent you won't find twice." The committee listened carefully, professionally, respectfully, and by the time he hung up, relief washed through him. He had finally done something that aligned his words with action, his remorse with responsibility. At the next board session, he didn't wait for questions. He addressed the room directly. "What happened to her was because of me," he said. "Not the rumor, my silence. My actions years ago created the conditions for someone to weaponize her past. I will not let that happen again." Some executives shifted uncomfortably. One attempted to speak. "Lincoln, with all respect, this level of personal responsibility." "No," he said firmly. "There are no levels to responsibility. I own all of it." That ended the conversation. He continued, "I was a different man 4 years ago. Fear-driven, cold, closed off. I am not that man anymore. And if anyone in this room has an issue with the fact that I am choosing to correct my past, speak now." Silence. Real silence. He sat back. "Good. Then we move forward with integrity." For the first time, his world did not shrink him. It listened. It respected. It adjusted. He walked out of that room feeling lighter. Not forgiven, but worthy of starting the path toward forgiveness. Isla didn't understand everything, but she understood enough. When Lincoln picked her up later that week for a short visit at the park, she ran to him with her notebook full of questions. But before opening it, she said, "Mommy said you did something brave." He crouched down. "Did she?" Isla nodded seriously. "She said you told the truth in a big room with a lot of people, and that you spoke nice about her, and that you were honest." Lincoln swallowed hard. "And what do you think about that?" he asked. Ayla tilted her head. "I think that makes your heart warm." He exhaled shakily. She continued, "And warm hearts are good hearts." His throat tightened. She leaned forward and wrapped her arms around his neck in a hug that felt too pure, too forgiving, too powerful for his unprepared heart. "I'm proud," she whispered. Lincoln closed his eyes. Not one boardroom, not one investor, not one achievement in his entire career had ever touched him the way that single sentence did. Isla pulled back and added, "Can we celebrate with ice cream?" He laughed through the emotion. "Yes," he whispered. "We absolutely can." They walked toward the ice cream stand, hand in hand. Analea watched from a few steps behind, not with fear, not with hesitation, but with something resembling hope. Real hope. Because Lincoln hadn't just apologized. He had acted. He had defended. He had restored. He had shown Ayla the man he could become, and shown Analea the man he never tried to be before. The park had grown quiet as the late afternoon sun softened to gold. Isla was a few feet away on the swings, kicking her legs as if she was trying to launch herself toward the sky. Lincoln and Analea sat on a nearby bench, not touching, not tense, just present, something new. He glanced at her carefully. "You didn't have to come today," he said softly. "Yes," she replied. "I did." He waited, unsure where the conversation was headed. She continued, "I've spent 4 years raising our daughter, 4 years working, 4 years rebuilding my life, and in all that time, I've carried the memory of what you said." He lowered his eyes. He expected anger. He expected fire, but her voice held something else, clarity. "I never told Ayla anything bad about you. Not once," she added, "because I didn't want her to inherit my hurt." He swallowed hard. "I don't deserve that kind of grace," he whispered. She breathed in slowly. "No," she said, "but you're doing the work to become someone who does." He looked up, genuinely caught off guard. She wasn't romanticizing him. She wasn't comforting him. She was stating truth. He nodded, voice wavering. "I'm trying, Anna. Really trying." "I know," she replied. Isla called out from the swing, "Mommy, look how high I am." Both of them looked. Both of them smiled. Both of them saw the same beautiful child, the bridge between their past and their future. A soft moment. Shared. Deep. Quiet. Honest. Later that evening, Lincoln walked her and Ayla back to their car. Isla climbed into the back seat, happily securing her seatbelt. humming to herself. Analea leaned against the car door, facing him. "You know," she said gently, "healing isn't a straight path." "I know." "You're doing well," she added, "but I won't pretend everything is magically fixed." He nodded. "I don't want magic. I want patience, consistency, time." That statement hit her unexpectedly. Not in a romantic way, in a mature way. "How did you get here?" she asked quietly. He took a deep breath. "When I lost you, something broke, and when I realized I lost my daughter too, the break got worse. Therapy helped. Time humbled me. Guilt shaped me. But seeing Ayla, really seeing her, showed me who I want to be." He hesitated, then added, "And I don't want to waste another day pretending emotions don't matter." A moment passed where both simply breathed. "You really have changed," she said finally. He shook his head gently. "No, I'm changing. It's a process. But I won't stop." That difference, between changed and changing, mattered more than he knew. It made her soften in a way she hadn't allowed herself to in years. Healing wasn't forgiveness. Healing wasn't romance. Healing was honesty. And today, they had begun that process together. Over the next several weeks, Lincoln showed up in ways that required effort rather than emotion. He didn't text her long paragraphs. He didn't overwhelm her with apologies. He didn't try to buy her things. He did something far more meaningful. He showed consistency. When he promised to pick up Ayla at 3:30, he arrived at 3:20. When he said he would help her with a school project, he researched it beforehand. When he didn't know something, he asked instead of assuming. He met her community too, not in a flashy way but respectfully. At a small neighborhood cookout, he stood awkwardly near the grill until one of her uncles teased him. "You're too stiff, son. Loosen your shoulders before they lock up." Lincoln laughed. A real laugh. Not the polished corporate one. Analea watched him from across the yard, not evaluating him, not judging him, but recognizing something new. Lincoln wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was simply showing up. The man who once hid behind fear was learning to be present, even when it made him uncomfortable. The man who once used coldness as armor was now choosing vulnerability because his daughter needed it. The man who once ran from responsibility was now building it brick by brick. One evening after dropping Ayla off, he lingered by the doorway. "Can I say something?" he asked softly. "Go ahead. I'm not doing any of this to win you back," he said. "I'm doing it because I should have been this man from the beginning." Her heart pulled in two directions. The memory of pain on one side, the reality of growth on the other. "Thank you for saying that," she whispered. "Thank you for giving me the chance to prove it," he replied. Their eyes held for a long moment, not yearning, not tension, but warmth, the kind that grows slowly, steadily, intentionally. Weeks turned into months with this new rhythm, co-parenting, quiet conversations, gentle understanding. One late evening, after a school event where Ayla performed a small science demonstration that impressed everyone, Lincoln walked her and Analea to their cars. Ayla had fallen asleep in her booster seat, holding a tiny flashlight she refused to let go of. The parking lot was calm. The air was cool. The moment was unforced. Lincoln stood beside her car, hands in his pockets. "You did great tonight," he said softly. "You guided her so well." "She did the work," she replied. "I just helped her practice." "She's brilliant," he murmured. "She is," she whispered back. A quiet pause. The comfortable kind that only forms when two people have shed old defenses. He stepped a little closer, not invading her space, not assuming permission, just enough that she felt the warmth of someone standing near, someone familiar, someone safe. "I haven't said this out loud," he began, "but being in her life, being in your life, it means more to me than anything I've ever achieved." Her throat tightened. She responded with the softest truth she had spoken in months. "You're doing well, Lincoln. Better than I expected." His breath caught, not because of praise, but because of acceptance. He reached out, slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wished. She didn't. His fingers brushed hers, light, respectful, tender. A small, intimate moment, not built on passion, but on trust rebuilt piece by piece. They stood like that quietly, their hands lightly touching, their hearts steady, neither rushing the moment nor defining it. This wasn't a reunion kiss. This wasn't a dramatic embrace. This was two people standing in calm closeness, acknowledging that something warm was returning between them at the right time, in the right way. It happened on a Saturday morning. Lincoln picked her up for breakfast, pancakes, her favorite. They sat in the booth, coloring and talking. He asked gently, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" She didn't hesitate. "Maybe a scientist, or someone who makes stars." He smiled. "You can be anything you want." She nodded with that serious expression she wore whenever she was thinking deeply. After breakfast, she climbed into the back seat. He buckled her in and was about to close the door when she said, "Wait." He paused. She looked up, her big brown eyes shining. "Dad, can we get ice cream too?" The world froze. Lincoln blinked. He wasn't sure he heard correctly. What did you say?" he whispered. Isla tilted her head in her usual way. "I said, Dad, can we get ice cream?" His breath broke. His knees weakened. Tears filled his eyes, quiet, stunned, overwhelming tears. He crouched down to her level. "Say it again," he whispered. She grinned. "Dad." He closed his eyes. A soft, broken exhale escaped him. He had waited 4 years to hear something he never imagined he'd deserve. She reached out and touched his cheek. "Are you okay?" she asked innocently. He nodded with a trembling laugh. "Yes," he whispered. "I'm more than okay." She smiled proudly. "So, can we get ice cream?" He laughed, really laughed. "Yes," he said. "We're getting all the ice cream you want." When he glanced up, he saw Analea standing outside the restaurant door, one hand covering her mouth. Not in shock, in gratitude, in peace, in something that looked very much like love returning. The following weekend felt different, not because of anything grand, but because the air around them finally carried something that had been missing for years: peace. Not forced peace, not fragile peace. A natural, lived-in calm that made everything else feel lighter. They spent the afternoon at the same Atlanta park where so many emotional moments had taken place. But today, there was no tension, no careful distance, no fear of the past interrupting the present. Lincoln sat on the grass, while Ayla arranged a set of colorful stones, into shapes she claimed were codes only smart people could read. He looked at her with awe that never faded. "Daddy, look," she called, proud of the pattern she created. "Daddy." She said it freely now, comfortably, as if it had always belonged to him. He stepped closer. "That's beautiful, sweetheart. What does it mean?" "It means we're a triangle," she said confidently. "A triangle?" he repeated. "Yep, 3 sides, 3 people, still standing." He froze at the symbolism. Children have a way of saying truths adults struggle to articulate. He turned to look at Analea, who was sitting beneath a tree watching them. She gave a soft, knowing smile, the kind that held years of growth, healing, and acceptance. A family, not perfect, not polished, but real. Isla tugged his hand. "Daddy, come draw with me." He joined her on the grass, while Analea walked over and sat beside them. Alia pushed the stones toward her mother. "You draw one too." Analea raised a brow. "What should mine be?" "Anything," Isla said. "As long as it's ours." That sentence wrapped around Lincoln's heart. As long as it's ours. For the first time in 4 years, nothing felt borrowed. Nothing felt uncertain. They were choosing this moment together. And the simplicity of it, grass beneath their feet, sunlight warming their skin, Isla giggling, held more meaning than any grand gesture ever could. Because healing rarely announces itself loudly. Sometimes it arrives quietly in a park on a warm day, where a child draws shapes in the grass and her parents rediscover what unity feels like. As the sun began to dip, casting long golden beams across the park, Isla stretched and yawned dramatically. "I'm sleepy," she announced, rubbing her eyes. Lincoln chuckled. "You ran around like you were training for a marathon." She climbed into his lap without hesitation, another new habit that melted him every time. "Daddy," she murmured, "can you walk with us today?" His chest tightened. "Yes," he said softly. "I'd love to." They gathered their things and stepped onto the walking path. A calm breeze rustled the leaves above them. Ayla held both their hands, hers small and warm between their palms. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like the most symbolic one of all. Isla swung their arms playfully as they walked. "You know what I think?" she announced boldly. "What?" Analea asked, amused. "I think we're supposed to be together." Lincoln and Analea exchanged a look, one filled with tenderness, surprise, and grateful disbelief. "And why do you think that?" Lincoln asked gently. "Because when people love each other, even when something bad happens, they're supposed to fix it and be together again." Her innocence cut straight to the core of them both. Analea cleared her throat, emotion tightening her voice. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "love needs time to grow again." "And you two had 4 whole years," Isla replied, shrugging. "That's a lot of time." They both laughed, but beneath the laughter was a truth that wrapped around them like a warm blanket. They weren't rushing into anything, but they weren't running from anything either. They were walking, literally and emotionally, into a new chapter, side by side, at a pace that honored the past but didn't chain them to it. By the time they reached the parking lot, the sun had fully set, leaving streaks of pink and purple in the sky. Isla released their hands and skipped ahead toward the car. Lincoln glanced at Analea. "She's right, you know." "About what?" "That we're supposed to be together." She held his gaze for a long, quiet moment. Then she gave a small nod. "Maybe we are." And the door to their future cracked open, not fully, not rushed, but just enough for hope to walk through. As they drove home together, Isla asleep in the back seat, her head leaning to the side, Lincoln and Analea fell into a comfortable silence. The kind of silence that doesn't ask anything, doesn't demand explanations, doesn't hide wounds. It simply allows the heart to breathe. And in that silence, the story's deeper truth revealed itself. Life gives us moments that break us, but it also gives us moments that rebuild us. Forgiveness is never sudden. Love is never perfect. Healing is never clean. But when people choose honesty over ego, humility over fear, and responsibility over pride, the future becomes possible again. Their story wasn't about a mistake. It wasn't about shame. It wasn't even about regret. It was about growth, the kind of growth that transforms a man too afraid to love into a father unafraid to try. The kind of growth that carries a woman from heartbreak to strength to love on her own terms. The kind of growth that brings a child the family she didn't even know she was waiting for. And the truth at the heart of it all? Second chances don't appear by accident. They appear when people are ready to rise. Family, if this journey touched your heart in any way, please take a moment to like this video. Drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from and what part of the story spoke to you the most. Your engagement helps YouTube share these meaningful stories with others who need comfort and inspiration. And if you're new to the channel, hit subscribe so you never miss a story that just might give you hope on a hard day. Remember, healing is possible. Love is possible. Second chances are possible. No matter what your past holds, your future is still wide open. Keep going. Your story isn't done yet.